Welcome back to our discussion of JavaScript, function expressions, arrow functions. We'll look at an example. So in my code here, I have this function expression which was left over from the last example. We have a variable and we set it to an anonymous function. In an arrow function is also a function expression. Notice on line 26. We have the declaration of a variable and we have we set it equal to something, but instead of having a function and then parentheses and then a body, we just have empty parentheses and an arrow, equal sign, and a greater than sign put together into a single token, and then the function expression of the actual body of the function on the right hand side of the arrow. So the parameter list on the left, the actual body of the function, where the logic is, on the right, and we set it equal to this variable here called sm3, and that's an arrow function. So notice the parameter list is always required on the left hand side of the arrow right here. So we're acknowledging here we have a parameter list that's empty, and on the right hand side we have the expression, and this has an implied return value here too. JavaScript functions always return something. If you don't have an explicit return, it'll be undefined. If you have return semicolon, that's also undefined. But there's also always returning something. In this case, alert returns undefined, and that's what would come out of this if it printed on the console. And that's the implied return value of sm3. So here's one that has actually integer or number return value, so a constant. So whatever the value of the expression is, a single expression over here, and in JavaScript expressions always have a value. Whatever value is found on the right hand side is the implied return type of this function. Arrow functions can also have bodies and more than 0 parameters. Here I have 2 parameters within the parentheses that were on the left, and then on the right hand side of the arrow, I now have a body, so I have two curly braces. When you have a body, the implied type of the return statement is no longer there. So if you want to return something, you need to explicitly have a return statement, and then that would behave like a normal JavaScript function. The data type of the function itself is dynamically determined by what it returns here. And the advantage of the arrow function with the body is that you can have whatever complicated logic you want to in between the curly braces. Now that you have curly braces, you have an entire context to write code in, just like a normal function. Arrow functions are great for quickly defining easy dynamic function creation. Here I have a prompt. What is your age? It has a default age here. I'm going to show you something a little different too. I haven't shown the const in JavaScript on line 44. Instead of let, I said const. I set default age equal to 22, and then it can't be changed. So it's a constant variable with a data type of number and equal to 23. So when I prompt, that default age will be filled in for the value. Hit OK. And then if the age is less than default age, so I'm using the constant twice there, it creates a function on the fly that says alert young. Otherwise, on the false side, it creates a function that says alert old, and then it calls welcome. So the welcome function is defined on the fly and then called when the page is loaded. And by the way, this is the only function that gets called in here. So these are function expressions that get created, but I'm not invoking any of these functions, so we won't see them. Let's refresh the page. I get the prompt there, and my default age shows up. And I'll enter 109, and it's going to call me old. And there I go. Okay. So I spoke about the functions that got created but never invoked, and we've also talked about the interaction of the JavaScript console. So I can actually call these functions at this point. I'm going to call multiply. And we see the value. It actually calls it and shadows the value until it returns, and then it returns it. But that's the function we defined over in the script. Remember, the console just adds to the script collections, so it knows about them. Let's call it always 10. Notice it's popping up in IntelliSense, so even in that context, it knows about these functions. Remember this also. Just the name without the parentheses returns the definition of the function, and there it repeats the arrow function syntax. Now I'll call sm3, and that's our arrow function. pops up, and there, yes, that's what it should do. SM3. I was expecting welcome or something. And notice the undefined. I wanted to especially show that. SM3 has no, it does have a return. Basically, it's returning what alert returns, which is undefined. Okay, arrow functions, another way, very convenient way to write function expressions in JavaScript.